Sitting by the Fire, a podcast on ancestral wisdom, medicine, heritage, and transformation by Anna Solyom. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for being here with us today. Good morning, good afternoon to you, depending on where you are at this globe. We are today sharing this fireside with you and with my good friend Alexis Ioannou, who is joining us from Greece, close from Athens. And we've met in this ancestral lineage healing circle or network that we both trained in with Dr. Daniel for. And this is one of the things where I thought it could be really interesting to share this time together. Alexis, can you share with us, please, what do you do in your days and how does that connect to ancestral healing for you?
Sure. Well, I'm predominantly a psychotherapist in the moment, and also trauma therapist. And so I work with people mostly on a one-to-one basis, but also in smaller groups. And how does this relate with ancestral healing? So my main sense is that we can often spend a lot of time in psychotherapy simply preparing for the work that we can touch in when we're working with the ancestors, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just an easier way in, and a slightly different way in. And for myself, after I trained as a therapist, I was looking for a frame that was slightly bigger and slightly wider and less reductive from psychology as a way to approach the world. And that's where this modality sort of came up.
What does it mean to you that ancestral healing is wider or broader? What would be the scope that connects within this ritual work of connecting with the ancestors?
Well, that's quite a bigger question in a way. As in lots of ways, we have a tendency to internalize everything, and in modern culture, and this often kind of centers us in a very self-referential way. It centers not only me or any other person as a human person, but it also just centers the human as the person who is ideally working towards developing maximum agency in the world. And I don't think we're necessarily equipped as humans to do that.
Yes. Or maybe to do that alone, that would be super difficult, and to do that disconnected from everything else that surrounds us.
Yeah. Yes. Well, the whole premise of maximizing one's agency often like invites us to think as we're the only ones who have agency. And that's where it gets tricky. So partly that's the wider frame that I don't mean for any moment to suggest that we shouldn't work towards having a sense of agency, but to really also inquire around what happens to us and what happens to the world around us when we make agency the most prized goal that we can reach.
Yeah.
And I seem to riff a lot around agency, but it's not just agency. It's just the centering of the human as someone who can do anything they want, essentially.
Yeah, centering the human as someone who can do anything they want. That's a very powerful statement for me. There is one word that's coming up in me connected to this centering and agency, which is responsibility. Maybe I think responsibility or radical responsibility, if you want to expand the circle of responsibility, really includes maybe the whole globe, maybe our communities on a larger level, maybe our community in the city or in the village where we're living, or a community of friends. So I like to think that communities, as they surround us, from the smaller cell to the larger organism, are part of this. Because when we look for coming into our full potential, it's I really like to quote Thich Nhat Hanh, who says that even in a piece of paper, you can contemplate the existence of the sun, of the rain that cultivated this tree, the land who gave it body and possibility, and the people who have cut the tree, and also the baker who prepared the bread for the person who tended the tree, so that in a piece of the universe we can actually contemplate the existence of many other beings. And I don't know if you agree, but what you described of agency and the bigger picture really connects me to that responsibility and the contemplation, and that we're not the sole existent on this planet who may have an intelligence. It doesn't necessarily need to be the same intelligence as, I don't know, as a salmon would have, but maybe there is something that we share with the salmon in this context.
Yeah. I mean, what comes to mind is a slightly more indigenous, let's say, understanding of health.
Oh, yes.
With all the nuance to apply to the word indigenous. It's
Yeah.
not suggesting that that's a framework we're necessarily functioning with, but really to explore our distance from that framework that sees health as a relational enterprise. That health is not necessarily an individual intrinsic aspect of us, but that health is lived in relationship, and that it relies on three different aspects. Right? The health of your relationship with other humans, the health of your relationship with non-humans, and the health of your relationships with the unseen, or the ancestors also.
Yes.
So you have all of these pillars on which health stands.
And staying in relationship with these three pillars of our health, and a bit focusing on the unseen or the ancestral realm, connecting with the other than human and non-human beings. Also recognizing that I don't identify as an indigenous person. I was born in Budapest. Maybe my ancestors have been in a very long time ago, maybe 1,400 years ago, in some other lands or even more. But in the context of being indigenous, in the understanding of being born in a land and cultivating a deep relationship with a certain land and all the ancestors of that land, I didn't grow up in that framework. So in that understanding, I don't consider myself indigenous. But I do consider myself a human being who aspires to this healthy relationship with other humans, with the unseen world, ancestors, and also other than humans. I will add the fourth pillar there, which is also the relationship with myself, if that's okay. So what is your understanding? How can maybe something that we could call a reverence work or repair work to come back to relationship with the unseen world, because maybe we don't grow up with that, to come back to relationship with other than human world, because maybe that's not evident. What could be really helpful in that direction, according to you?
Well, I think what I find more and more helpful, the more I sit with this way of approaching, I find that starting from recognizing what we're lacking, what we're missing, and in turn also what we're longing for.
Absolutely.
Is starting to just creak the door open a little bit. Because it's so easy to just bypass that.
Oh yeah.
That longing and that and that and that and that missing of something, in order to get to sort of higher realms or higher states, and think that we've recovered sort of a way of relating, or we've recovered something that's that makes us special in another way. Whereas I find that cultivating, like staying in touch with our own poverties, with to actually just be able to open the heart for something new to come in, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes. Sometimes we do everything in our powers to cover the heart and avoid to open it and avoid to look at all the things that we miss. I recognize that also in my life. I think that's already a big courage to see what I miss, or to be able to name what I would need to feel complete, or what is that my life is lacking. And I think that maybe one common thing that really helps us to turn to the unseen or the other than humans, the ancestors, is exactly something around that space. Now that I recognize that maybe there is a piece missing. I don't know if it is a piece or something else. What was it, if I can ask you about this direction? What was that piece that led you toward this greater connection with ancestors and the unseen world or the other than human people?
Mm. So I think for me, it's a combination of things.
Mm.
First, I have an earlier background in science, and with a lot of respect and an appreciation for science and everything that it can do. It also trained me to think in a quite specific way
Mm.
that that looks for solutions, that that looks for fixings, that that looks for like tightly knit ways to understand
Mm.
something. And and somehow when I trained as a therapist, I found myself working in in palliative care and working with people close to the end of their lives.
Mm.
And, and this way of thinking and um, approaching the world, approaching people, approaching relationship with this idea of um, finding solutions or finding ways to fix um, is actually really so pervasive.
It is.
And so I'm not in any way trying to like exile this way of thinking, as it's really like a big part of me and everyone. But bringing this way of thinking in that line of work, um, I'd say was a big lesson, and a little bit of like being slapped around,
Mm.
really.
What happened? That doesn't sound like a very good experience, being slapped around.
Yeah, well, I mean, in retrospect, it was a challenge, and was it was a big destabilization
Mm.
of of my own sense of self, of my own sense of identity, and
Mm.
a big period of like internal reckoning about how I show up in the world. And of course, that was both deeply difficult and intensely beautiful
Mm.
at the same time. So the presence of ancestors, let's say, or was something that I felt around me, or that was a subject that was close to me without necessarily having had
Mm.
any structured way to approach it or think about it. Um, and that's where it kind of became a little bit more of an imperative to
Mm.
to find a way to approach the unseen, to approach mystery, to
Mm.
approach the ancestors in
Can I ask you?
a way. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm really curious what was in that experience of offering psychotherapy, if I understood well, in palliative care that brought up this confrontation. Was that it was not applicable there to bring the scientific approach, that we can repair things, that we can maybe dissect and replace, or what was that really
Hmm.
removing experience? Because I hear there's something opened up, a space in you with moving, like the tectonics of the personality in a way,
Mhm.
when things come in a different context or a different perspective, if it's okay for share.
It's yeah, it's it's a little bit it's a little bit nuanced in a way that although at the time, let's say, I wasn't necessarily bringing this this stance of trying to fix and understand everything, um, as I was working within a medical model,
Okay. Mm.
like as most palliative care organizations, the dominant model is the medical model, which tries to treat and and diagnose and provide the right kind of fix
Mm.
for the problem, which of course is a little bit of a paradox
Oh yeah.
when what you're working with is death.
Yes, yes, I feel that.
Um, and there's just something that happens when you oppose something so prevalent,
Mm.
and I'm the person who opposes
Mm.
often, or the rebel. Um, and there's something that can happen if you oppose something so big and prevalent in such a way that it others what you're opposing, that can actually end up harming you in a way that, or it can end up, you can end up becoming the thing that you oppose if you oppose it by othering.
Yeah. By othering, meaning that it's something that belongs to the others, that happens to the others, but not me.
Yes,
This is what you mean? Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. That's a very hard
And
belief. Yes.
so within these sort of games
Mm.
that that we play, often a lot of us end up playing these games of othering, I find, and opposing what we other.
Yeah.
Um, uh, like we can redeem this kind of like oppositional approach, this oppositional disorder.
Yeah, there is even a disorder called oppositional defiance disorder or something like that, when someone is
Yeah.
expressing the healthy anger, basically. We
Yes.
that, as Dr. Gabor Mate calls it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, there are a lot of games, and what I think is really, really interesting, how actually our connections with the unseen, our connections with the other than human and the ancestral world, if we find ways to get in touch with them, can help us to, first of all, maybe stop the othering, not contributing to that game, taking ourselves out of that as much as possible. And maybe also gaining like a different perspective of things. Because I'm not sure, but I think what you spoke about is that this experience altered your vision or perspective, how you were understanding things around you and life and your personality, like expanding to the connections with the ancestors. Is it so?
Yes, and also just coming back to the something you mentioned earlier around like like a deeper and more radical sense of responsibility.
Yeah.
And often I understand this kind of radical responsibility as not the usual responsibility um, of a citizen of a modern nation, that you're responsible, you pay your taxes, you do everything that kind of is expected of you, but a kind of responsibility to hold a bigger picture, your place in everything, your and really inquire on your position in the world, inquire around the consequences that of your actions and of the way you show up, and not in a way that you're seeking for purity, but in a way of seeking some form of integrity, let's say.
What do you think? How would integrity look and feel like in that context of radical responsibility, like being responsible for the whole of life itself, not only paying taxes and belonging to the community where we are at? I am inevitably thinking about The Matrix from '99, so the first original Matrix movie. Like, he's a good citizen, he's paying taxes, and he's taking the garbage out. Of course, that's a very important point. But yes, exactly. Maybe there is a greater responsibility in our lives. And maybe all those climate issues or extinction issues in different species that are ongoing presently in the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom, maybe that's something like a wake-up call, for our own, like expanding the circles of responsibilities. I don't think that responsibility here would mean like beating ourselves up because something is not going well. It's not about that. It's rather like standing up for things we believe have a value, and maybe also I don't know, recognizing when we make mistakes, recognizing the impact of our words have or our actions have. Is it that context that you speak about also?
It is that context, and it's also, I think, nothing intensely outward.
Of course not.
Um, so I think we can both um, have a stance for things and have certain positions and and um, and kind of support them in the world, but be careful also of turning our positions into crusades.
Yes, of course.
Um,
Yeah.
and we can also like think of the idea of responsibility as the ability to respond also.
Mm.
And 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 that places us in a slightly more position of let's listen
Mm.
what's coming way.
Yes.
Even as I'm just saying it, I start to feel like I want to sit a little bit more backwards,
Yes.
and that I don't necessarily have to feel the pressure of being a responsible human being. But if I inhabit like a relational field, both with my ancestors and with others around me, and seek to maintain some form of relational accountability, then I'm responsible.
Mm.
I'm responsible for my actions and how my actions have consequences that go beyond me.
Yes. It captured me how you mentioned listening and how you moved back and relaxed a little bit in your body when you mentioned how space was created here by the simple mentioning of offering ourselves to listening something that may come to our ways. And there's a question that is arising in me, especially if there are people for whom this would be maybe a newer perspective, not yet as practiced or recognized as maybe for you or for me. How do we come to meet those relationships? So how can we come to relationship with all these pillars of health or all these relatives around us? The word that's coming to me is relatives, like in a way of recognizing that we belong together, but I don't know how to come to relationship with that. What would you suggest to do there? And it's a big question, but I still wanted to ask you.
Yeah, it's a big question, and I'm not sure I necessarily have like suggestions or advices. But
Where did you start? What was your starting point?
um, well, I mean, in the story that I've already told you, the starting point was messing up.
That's a good starting point. Although
My,
is
the starting point was making mistakes
mm, mm,
and setting up to do a certain thing and failing to do it.
yes. That's a very
Um,
important starting point. I agree.
and I think we sort of underestimate the value of failure.
Mm. That we
Um,
underestimate the value of failure. Yes, I agree.
not to say that because some people can turn things around on their heads as well, and not to kind of make failure into a new god, into a new sort of
We don't want
thing
that.
that
Yeah.
you don't want to seek failure over agency necessarily.
No, it's rather like recognizing its value in as a teacher, maybe.
Hmm.
I,
Yeah.
I think sometimes with mistakes, it really ourselves that we hurt a lot. And maybe when we can recognize that, that's really a valuable lesson to know that,
Hmm.
oh,
Hmm.
I made a misstep here and this resulted in that and that and that. How can I be maybe more conscious to avoid that next time? If I'm not aiming for failure, of course.
Hmm. Yeah. And I mean, some people suggest sort of zooming out from the moments of failure and seeing things from a slightly more detached perspective,
Mm.
or slightly more kind of equanimous perspective, where you're holding like the impacts of what momentarily might have felt as a failure in
Yeah.
the larger scheme of your life and your things, and being more critical about using the word failure. But I'm still a sort of fan and supporter of allowing the reality of the moment might feel like a failure.
Yes. Mhm. Yes. I don't know if it's true for you. It's definitely true for me that I grew up in a family settings where making mistakes or doing mistakes result in you being a failure,
Hmm.
quote quote, because it's like identifying your value or your humanity or whatever you are, you believe, with being a failure. And that's something that we're not speaking about here. I'm bringing it in here because I know that that resulted in my life wanting to avoid failure as much as possible, wanting to avoid making mistakes and feeling utterly demolished when making a mistake because of shame. No, that, oh, I made a mistake. I should be not making mistake. This could be a belief also that is present in our lives. And in that connection, for instance, connecting with this greater relational word helped me to recognize that mistakes are an organic part of life. And as a human being, I'm also a very imperfect being in the understanding that there are things that even if I try, I can't succeed to make it good. I can try as hard as I can, but maybe it's not important to make it perfect, to make it good. Maybe what is important is to be in conversation with that field or with that person or with that relationship. And it's okay to make mistakes.
And how do the ancestors come in this play? How do they come in this
Everyone's
field?
ancestors are going to be very different. My ancestors are very loving and accepting with mistakes, knowing that that's part of the human condition. So actually, it was very helpful to be kinder with being a human on this globe. I don't know, how is it for you? What your ancestors know about making mistakes?
Hmm. Well, often that's the crack from which they can come in more.
Mm.
Um, that's that's also like something in me is called to soften and and allow their presence more.
Mm. Mm.
And
Yeah.
that's often when yeah, somehow I can feel invited to a greater field
Mm.
that's slightly beyond mistakes and beyond right and wrong.
Maybe that's the field where that of Rumi, the poet, spoken about. Be-
There's something about that quote was in my mind, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Like beyond the field of right and wrong, we meet. Um, yeah. For a moment, I had the impression that maybe it is these cracks that allow this connectivity, a connective field of ancestors, invisible, come closer to really be in touch. Maybe this can happen because those cracks are actually in some mysterious way that that alchemia or alchemistic way mold us, that allow that we come into terms that we are not alone, that this individual bubble that we build ourselves in maybe it's just an illusion. I think it's possibly easier to really let it go when we really are in a need of connection or of help or care.
Mm. Yeah. Uh, some someone who I've studied with and spent a fair amount of time like has has mentioned something about speaking about indigenous people and and saying that they're in no way sort of better humans
Mm.
or more complete humans or more um, self-materialized, um, but that they hold an understanding that to be human includes forgetting to be a human also.
Mm. What would be
Uh,
the context of forgetting to
that's
be human?
that was said by Stephen Jenkinson, just to credit him,
Yeah.
and and so the context I think which I'm bringing it is in this frame of we are made and we are undone,
Mm. Mm.
and we're in no way a kind of linear project of being continuously more made, but we include our lives include like us being undone and and making space for like sometimes clutter to leave us and sometimes something more painful.
Yes.
Um, and so I think I don't know we can be with life and death in every given moment.
Yes.
Like something lives on, something dies. Um,
Yes, I feel in those words that you say, something lives, something dies. Like being undone and being made. It brings up the Tai Chi symbol in my mind with the black and white symbol with the dots, and also some parts in the black, a white part, and the black part in the white. But also beyond that, the word pain and how we carry pain and what we do with pain. And in that context, what comes to me is also grief, because one realization was for me, and I think it's something that can bring us to ancestral work or connect with ancestors, is how we metabolize or how we don't want to metabolize all that heritage, all that grief that our lineages carry. And I think every person and every lineage deals with that differently. But when there is a larger crack, when some of this unmetabolized, 100 years old grief that's like being put together for like a mountain and we're sitting on it and we're not even conscious about it, when it starts to be undone, that's something I would call liberation in a very, very deep level.
mm, mm, yeah.
Mm. What can be for you, Alexei, like a very, or the most important message in working in this greater connected field, a connective field of the being, they would like to share with others?
Like an important message, you
Yes,
say.
yes, something that you cooked in your own kitchen and discovered out of this working together with this greater field of connections and other than humans and ancestors.
Three things come to mind about being humble,
Mm.
cultivating discernment, and being open to being surprised, really.
Mm.
Um, um, and that's what I found, that often when I'm least expecting it, I'm surprised.
Yeah.
So this often helps to re-enchant the way I look at the world,
Mm.
and just animates it again.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that. And also thank you for joining me here by the fire. I hope.
My fire looks like a gas stove right next to me.
I actually see something like drawing some fire color on your wall just behind the flower.
Ah,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a candle too.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. I remember supporting a ancestral medicine intensive together in Granada and having shared a fire for 4 evenings together where we really talked by a fire and
It
fire.
wasn't so cold even, was it?
No, it was
But
so
the
cold.
fire was great.
Yeah, we did enjoy sharing time and sitting by the fire.
Yeah.
So I hope this is an experience that we can offer to others,
Mhm.
and that this fire is an open place. Everyone is welcome to join. So I hope that we can continue these conversations with and around our ancestors. And thank you very much for being here today with us. And thank you, Alexei, to come and chat with me.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you.
Pleasure.